Hello friends, thank you very much for walking along with me on to this 21st video in this series, and let us take 10 more questions today to learn more about the system of governance in India. As always, keep your copy of the Constitution of India handy for reference, and for best learning I recommend you pause the video after every question, mark your own answer and only then proceed to listen. You can also get all these questions at one place as a quiz and in PDF on the Telegram channel. The link is in the description of the video. And keep following the parallel silent quiz running through the pictures on the slides on the right hand side, as we have always done. So let's take the first question. Which of the following statements are correct about the Public Accounts Committee of Parliament of India? There are a lot of questions that we've taken up on committees, and Public Accounts Committee also has come earlier, so I'm sure this shouldn't have been difficult. First statement says it consists of not more than 25 members. Well, actually, the rule is that it has to be less than or equal to 22 members, right? So as such, if you see technically something which is not more than 25 could still be more than 22, right? So don't get confused. The rule is 22 maximum. So this is actually a wrong statement. Then second one says it scrutinizes the appropriation and the finance accounts of the government. Absolutely correct. This is the main activity, and ultimately this finance accounts and appropriation accounts, it's largely based on the examination of the report of the CAG of India. So both of these are correct statements, shouldn't have been that difficult. Half of you got the right answer, and that there is the flag of England. I'm sure you can differentiate it from the flag of United Kingdom, which was there on the first starting slide, the Union Jack. Which also has the saltire of St. Andrew, the patron saint of Scotland, right? Okay, so the next question we have is which of the following statements are correct? The first statement says the Union Council of Ministers shall be collectively responsible to the Parliament. Now, I'm sure we know that this is actually not entirely correct, because their collective responsibility to Parliament is not there under Article 75. The responsibility is only to the one house of parliament, that is Lok Sabha. Okay, so as a standalone statement, this is not an accurate option to choose, so we will not mark this. Then second one says the union ministers hold office during the pleasure of the president. Absolutely correct. This is also a provision that we have in Article 75 there. Ministers hold office during the pleasure of the president at the union level, and similarly for the governor in the state level. Third one says the prime minister shall communicate to the president about the proposals for legislation. This is also true. In fact, this is a provision of Article 78, where it says that all decisions of the Council of Ministers regarding administration of the country and proposals for legislation shall be communicated to the president. President can also ask for this kind of information from the prime minister. Make sure you read Article 78 and Article 75. Shouldn't have been that difficult. But again, not difficult questions is where we get half, I've realized. So we go on to the next question, and that is which of the following statements is or are correct regarding the powers of Rajya Sabha with respect to a money bill? Okay, this is a very straightforward question. I'm sure all of us know that under Article 109, it's very clear that a money bill cannot be introduced in the Rajya Sabha. That's in fact the very first provision there. However, clause 2 says that a money bill is transmitted to the Rajya Sabha for its recommendations. Okay, so Rajya Sabha gets the bill only to give its recommendations. Okay, so Rajya Sabha cannot amend or reject. Okay, it cannot amend or reject a money bill. However, you should know in this regard the rules of the house very appropriately. Okay, so now that we know the first principles here of Article 109, you should also know very well that they can't reject or amend. Rajya Sabha cannot reject or amend a money bill, but amendments can be moved in the house by the members. Okay, so the members of the Rajya Sabha, they can move amendments like they can move amendment for any other bill, but these amendments are moved as a recommendation only. Okay, and if passed by the house, they are forwarded as a recommendation to the Lok Sabha. So just make sure you are clear in this. Anyway, none of this is correct because none of these powers are with the Rajya Sabha there. Okay, so we move on to the next question, and that is, which of the following instances justify the invoking of Article 356 under the Constitution of India? Essentially, the provision is that whenever the president is satisfied, which means the union government is satisfied, that the administration, the government of the state, it cannot be run in accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, right? So in a way, there is a violation of Constitution. In other words, there is a breakdown of constitutional machinery. So whenever these kind of questions come, you need to ensure you are able to catch that. So claim to an independent sovereign status by the state. Obviously, it is a violation of the Constitution. We are a federal nation where the states have to be together with the union. So to claim an independent sovereign status itself is a breakdown of the Constitution. So definitely this will be a ground with the union government to impose 356. Then subverting of basic features of the Constitution. Yes, definitely. For example, again, as I said in the first point, if there is a violation of being a federation, or let's say democracy is being subverted. So, of course, these are subjective areas, and that's why we have courts, but definitely this will be one area where 356 can be imposed. Disregard to a direction issued by the union government under Article 257. This, in fact, is a very clear-cut provision there. You should know that Article 257 as well as Article 355. So 257 is regarding direction for maintenance of means of communication declared to be of national importance or military importance, and also regarding the protection of railways in the state. That's 257. Further, 355, it's regarding the union's duty to protect the states from external aggression and internal disturbance, as well as to ensure that the administration in the state is carried on in accordance with the Constitution. That is to say that there should not be a breakdown of constitutional machinery. In all of this, another article that is relevant for all of us is Article 365. Article 365, which states that if the states they fail to follow the directions given by the union, so the president may consider this as a situation where the administration of the state cannot be carried on as per the provisions of the Constitution. Okay, so essentially this paves the ground to impose president's rule under Article 356. Okay, so I'll recommend you read these three articles, 257, 355 and 365 as well. Of course, 356 I am sure you have read already. So this is also a correct statement. Fourth one, no party or parties are able to secure majority in the state legislature after a general election in the state. This is correct. In fact, you would recall that last year, 2019 in November, after the Maharashtra election, when the stalemate happened, president rule was imposed precisely on this ground itself. So that's on that. And this gentleman here is EMS Namboodiripad, leader of one of the world's first democratically elected governments in India, Kerala. In 1959, the government, though, was dismissed by a controversial use of Article 356, the first time when it is said to have been misused by the union. Anyway, do read about him. Next question is, which of the following statements are correct regarding a constitutional bench of Supreme Court of India? The constitutional bench is provided for in Article 145 of the Constitution, and where it says that the minimum strength of judges shall be 5. So it's not that it must consist of 5, it should be at least 5, right? So this becomes a wrong statement for us. And it is set up to decide cases involving substantial question of law regarding interpretation of Constitution. Yes, absolutely. This is the reason why it is even called a constitutional bench. Okay, so you should know here that there are other cases also, purposes also, for which you can have a bench of 5 or more judges. For example, in case of review of earlier judgments of the court where the judges were lesser than 5, or even the election dispute petition in case of the election of the President of India or Vice President of India, there will be a bench of, minimum 5 judges. And of course, being the master of the roster, it is constituted by the Chief Justice of India, and its provision is mandated. Oh yeah, I already told you Article 145, so this is also correct. So 2, 3 and 4, these are the correct options for us. Many of you could not get it right. I think most problem was this consists of 5 or minimum 5 or things like that. Okay, never be confused in future. Read the provisions, you'll always do well. So the article 145. Next question is, which of the following has the authority and by which procedure to provide for a legislature for the Union Territory of Lakshadweep? The most important article, the relevant article here is Article 239. Okay, please do read it. I know Union Territory is an area where people generally don't focus so much, but we cannot take any chance. Last year itself, I mean this year when you are preparing, a lot of things have happened in the Union Territories, merger, etc. Union Territory is an important area. Please focus on that. The very first clause here will tell you that save as otherwise provided by Parliament by law, every Union Territory shall be administered by the President acting through an administrator, right? So it says, except when it is through a law made by Parliament. Okay, so you must also know that there was an Act of Parliament. I mean, there is an Act of Parliament, the Government of Union Territories Act 1963, Government of Union Territories Act, which mandates that every Union Territory of India should have an assembly and a council of ministers to aid and advise the administrator. However, all the Union Territories of that time have now become states, except Puducherry. Be it Delhi or Himachal Pradesh or Manipur or Tripura, they actually have become a state largely. So effectively the act is now relevant only for Puducherry, which is what is referred in Article 239A of the Constitution. Okay, it's another article that was inserted after the 14th Constitutional Amendment Act when Puducherry was incorporated in the territory of India as the 9th Union Territory at that time. So anyway, the answer is Parliament by law. And I must express, this, that a lot of you do surprise me at times. This fourth option here, this was put in there just for fun. And it's an absolutely random option. Yet I see that 7% of you, that is close to 300 respondents, mark this answer. I mean, what has Kerala got to do with Lakshadweep's, having its own union territory, its own legislature or not? So, boss, if you are these 300 people who mark this, you need to seriously up your game here. Okay, I know I'm harsh at times, but I need to tell you that you need to improve. All right. So, moving on to the next question. That's the flag of ASEAN, by the way. 207. Which of the following statements are correct regarding the doctrine of colorable legislation? Not a difficult question, nothing tricky here. It's simply asking what is this doctrine. So the Supreme Court of India in different judicial pronouncements has laid down the certain tests to determine the true nature of legislation, okay, which is impeached as colorable, okay, which is being questioned as colorable. So the court must look at the substance of the law as distinguished from its form or the label which the legislation has given it. Right, which the legislature has given it. So yes, they will look at the object and the effect. I mean, is it within the jurisdiction or not? This doctrine of colorable legislation has nothing to do with the motive of the legislation. Okay, it has got nothing to do with the motives. The doctrine is in a sense a question of wires, okay, or the power of the legislature to enact the law in question. So is it ultra vires or intra vires? That's all. The doctrine does not involve any question of bona fide or mala fide intention on the legislature's part. If the legislature is competent enough to enact a particular law, then whatever motive which impelled it to act are irrelevant. And as we have seen in an earlier video already, that the motive of legislature in passing a statute is beyond the scrutiny of the courts anyway. So forget this doctrine, any doctrine, the court will not question that. Now focus on what I'm going to say very, very carefully and listen again, okay? The court has no power to scrutinize the policy which led to an enactment of a law falling within the ambit of the legislature. Ponder. And why did I put the maple leaf there? Well, this is what you see in the flag of Canada and also in Shah Rukh Khan's starrer Mohabbatein. That's the flower. Anyway, better performance next time. Next question is, which of the following statements are correct in respect of 0-hour discussion in the parliament? Well, 0 hour is a convention and there is no specific rule in any of the houses to regulate it. It is just a practice that has emerged over time. There is a popular proverb I should tell you regarding the 0 hour, as they say, 0 hour is like a path in the countryside There was never a path, but when people walk on it, it comes into existence. That's pretty much like a convention, but the thing is, zero hour happens almost on a daily basis. So that's another thing. It's not even necessary to have a zero hour every day, by the way. So what exactly is this zero hour? Okay, so it is the interregnum between the end of question hour and the beginning of the regular listed business in the house. Okay, so generally it ends up being conducted at 12 o'clock. Okay, so members can raise issues of great public importance and urgency. Although euphemistically called zero hour, it may not even last for an hour. It may last for some time, which may be half an hour or more or less or anything like that. Okay, and as I told you, it's not necessary to have a zero hour in every session. So if you ever wish to see the real drama in the house and the real essence of democracy at work, switch on the channel during question hour or zero hour. So anyway, we have the first statement is correct and it is directed against individual ministers. Yes, it's basically questions being asked by the members. It covers questions raised. I told you that. It is a device present in. I told you that also. So all of these are correct. Never be confused here. But the performance. Anyhow, that's the logo of WTO. So next question is, which of the following statements are correct regarding the Lokpal and Lokayuktas Act of 2013? Okay, it seeks to implement the UN Convention Against Corruption. This is correct, absolutely. In fact, the preamble of this act very clearly writes this. This, in fact, is the first sentence there that India has ratified this convention and we need to make this law. Then chairperson members of the Lokpal shall not be less than 45 years of age. That is correct. This is a provision I just wanted you to know. Group C and D officials are not under. No, that's incorrect. Everybody, the entire government machinery, in fact, is there. So you will see that the Prime Minister is there, other ministers are there, the members of Parliament, as well as Group A, B, C, D. All government officers and officials, they are covered under the act. Okay, of course, technically speaking, Group D does not exist now. The names have been changed. So the fourth one says that there are provisions to punish false and frivolous cases. Absolutely correct. So 1, 2, and 4 should be correct. Now that country there, in case you have not been able to identify so far, but I'll seriously say pause, think, ponder. That is Sweden. Where the concept of ombudsman originated in 1809. Okay, ombudsman, which is where the idea of the Lokpal comes from. So an ombudsman is generally regarded as an official body of complaint which protects individuals against the abuse of power and maladministration. Okay, that is precisely what this Act of 2013 is about. Something that was actually recommended by the first ARC, by the way. Okay, first ARC, and that was 1966. And yeah, like 47 years or so later, we made that act in 2013, which was a concept in 1809 itself in countries like Sweden. Although the Lokayuktas in India trace their history back to Maharashtra when they created for the first time, the Lokayukta in 1971. Read more on that later. Next we have, which of the following statements regarding the pro-term speaker are correct? Now I find this is an area which a lot of people have been confused. The performance on this question has not been that great and a lot of confusion remains. So I'll recommend you pay full attention and listen very, very carefully. Okay, I've seen aspirants think pro-term in a very limited sense of just appointment done during the election. Okay, and that's okay because this happens more regularly because of the books, and the news reports also have that limited vision when discussing the topics. See, understand it very properly here. What is a speaker pro-term really, right? So let's look at this term which says the phrase pro-term. Actually, the phrase pro tempore means for the time being. So whenever there is nobody to do the work of the speaker, president will appoint a speaker for the time being, that is speaker pro tem, be it the first session after election or in between the elections. In between the elections also, say if the office of the speaker as well as the deputy speaker falls vacant. So as per the rules, it is the president who appoints a temporary speaker who will conduct the election of the next speaker, right? And this is exactly what happened in the first Lok Sabha also, by the way. And there were 3 speaker pro tems appointed during the first Lok Sabha. The first one being the gentleman here who also became the speaker of the first Lok Sabha, the first speaker of Lok Sabha, Ganesh Mavlankar. With that basic understanding, let's read. After the Lok Sabha elections, the President administers oath to the pro tem speaker, which is same as the oath of membership of the Lok Sabha. Absolutely correct. There is no separate oath for this pro tem speaker or any speaker. They take oath just as a member. Then pro tem speaker conducts the proceedings of the House when both the speakers and deputy speakers posts lie vacant due to death. Yes, absolutely. This is what I told you, that this is also a situation when the President appoints somebody temporarily. That is also called speaker pro tem. Now, since it has not happened for so many years, the books and newspapers don't talk about it. They only explain as if pro tem means the one appointed only in the first session after election. No, you need to understand it as a concept. I hope you have done that today. Then, no pro tem speaker has ever become the speaker later. No, absolutely not. I just told you, Ganesh Mavlankar, he was the pro tem speaker and then he became the speaker. Even Somnath Chatterjee in more recent times, in our lifetime, he was first appointed pro tem and then he became the speaker. So, 1 and 2 are the correct ones. To end today's video, I thought I'll just bring this up in terms of the differentiation between England and the Great Britain and the United Kingdom. So you can pause and continue to make sure you understand the difference between these terms that we use. I'll see you soon with another video and 10 more questions. Till then, study well. Thank you very much.